Okay? Don't just give me the easy ones, including the young people. Give me the hard ones. I see a Republican Party that has become lazy, actually. And I don't just mean lazy in the get out the vote operation sense of lazy. I mean lazy in defining what we even stand for. The other side is good at this. Say what you will about them. They'll offer a vision, race, gender, sexuality, climate. And the Republican Party, what we've been doing for a long time now is we're sitting around complaining about that other side's vision, but without offering a vision of our own. What do we stand for? Individual, family, nation, God. That beats race, gender, sexuality, and climate if we have the courage to actually stand for something. That's what I want to see us do. Level up as a party. My generation, I'm 33 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run. I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. I was going to say Thomas Jefferson was 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. And there's a reason why these revolutions, these revivals are led by the next generation. I think it's going to take somebody with fresh legs coming in from the outside who isn't captured by the corruption of broken politics. Every politician, it's true, dances to the tune of their biggest donor. But in my case, that biggest donor is me. I think it's going to take somebody coming in from the outside with fresh legs from the next generation to reach and lead the new generation of Americans. That's why I'm in this race. That's my job. Let's make those basic attributes of our country: faith, family, patriotism, hard work. Let's make those things cool again in this country. I think we can, and with your help, we're going to do it. My friend Maddie introduced me. I think we're going to win the Iowa caucus. We're going to deliver a shock on January 15th because many of our supporters, it sounds like many of you in this room, haven't been to an Iowa caucus before. That's a good thing. If we send that shock to the system, we will revive who we are as a country. That's why I'm in this race. Yes, I'm in for America first. But to put America first, we have to rediscover what this country is. That's what I'm in this race to do. So with that, I don't want to give you a speech. I want to hear from you. Tell me what's on your mind. Give me the hard ones. If I can sit across the table from Xi Jinping, I want to sit across the table from our own voters.
What are you going to do about the swamp?
Yeah.
You see what it did to Trump. You see where he's at. He's in prison. They're doing everything to destroy him. How are you going to change Washington, D.C.?
So listen, this is why I'm in this race, okay? Trump tried to strike the swamp strikes back. That's what happens. They duped him. They said that, hey, you can't fire those large numbers of federal employees because of the so-called civil service protections. What does that mean? They said those civil servants can sue you if you fire them. No. Read the law. Those civil service protections only apply for individual firings. They do not apply to mass layoffs, and mass firings are what I'm bringing to the D.C. bureaucracy. Here's the dirty little secret of American politics. The people who we elect to run the government, they are no longer even the ones who actually run the government. It's the shadow government in Washington, D.C. and those three-letter agencies. So in my first term, we're going to have a 75% reduction in the number of federal bureaucrats. That's how you drain the swamp. You can't just tinker around the edges. You got to get in there and shut down government agencies. Trump told him, hey, go reform the Department of Education with Betsy DeVos. It doesn't work. You have to get in there and shut it down. Replacing James Comey at the top of the FBI doesn't work. You have to get in there and actually shut it down. Take the 15,000 agents on the front lines, move them to the U.S. Marshals, which hasn't been corrupted in the same way, or the DEA. So in many ways, the way I look at it is this. I give Trump a lot of credit. He's an outsider like me. He did what he could do. He rolled over the log, and we saw what crawled out of that swamp. I'm bringing the pesticide. That's what it's going to take. And this is the most important question probably, is what's the difference? It's going to take somebody who, yes, has sharp elbows, is willing to break some glass, when necessary. You guys, if you've been watching the debates, anybody watch the debates? A few of you. Well, I'll do that on the debate stage. I'm bringing that to Washington, D.C. But it's going to, and Trump brings that too. But it's going to take an outsider who also understands the law and the Constitution of this country. And I'm not going to be duped. I'm going to see this through. We'll take it to the Supreme Court. We'll win 6-3. The current Supreme Court agrees with what I just told you. Day one in office. I mean, it's got to be something extreme like this. If you have an odd social security number, you're out. If you have an even number, you're in. On day two, that federal bureaucracy is going to be half of its size. The sun will still rise in the east and set in the west. It's going to take a president who's not playing with a chisel. You got to bring a chainsaw on day one and then bring the chisel after that. That's what it's going to take. I've taken on bureaucracies my entire life and won. My parents came to this country with no money to pursue opportunity. In a single generation, I have founded multiple multi-billion-dollar companies, taken on the bureaucracy of broken big pharma, taken on the bureaucracy of the ESG cartel, building the competitor to BlackRock, pushing back against the ESG movement, for those of you who know what that is. I've been taking on my bureaucracies my entire career, and we win. Now we're taking on the biggest bureaucracy of all in the federal government. So thank you, sir. It's a great question. It's the right one to ask. There's nobody in this country that has a better understanding and ability to actually shut down the deep state. If we do that, the rest of our challenges become easier. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Go here, and then we'll go here.
Yes, you say you're going to declare independence from China on day one. I was a resident. I lived there 3 years, saw how they stole us blind. What will you do about that? I mean, what will you put some teeth in that and maybe even use the WTO to go after their violation of intellectual property and that type of thing?
Well, that's a great point. You've lived there, you know this. So I've actually spent a decent amount of time in China. I was an exchange student there for 2 of my springs, one in Beijing, one of the other was in Hong Kong, actually. And then I actually have, in my first business, done business in China. In the first business I started, and you see how bad that is. I got the hell out of there, and when I started my next business, Strive, we made a day one commitment that we would never do business in China. And so he takes a president who understands this deeply on what they're doing. Right? They're using our own rules back against us. So as it relates to the WTO, my plan is to kick them out of the WTO. Right? We're the biggest funders of the WTO. Kick them out because they're not playing by the same set of rules. My conversation with Xi Jinping is a very different one than the one that Joe Biden just had with the Chinese flags lining San Francisco. Here's my conversation. You will not buy land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. You will not use our companies as your pawns. And we will not let U.S. businesses expand into the Chinese market until China is playing by the same set of rules. No IP theft. No data theft. No turning companies into lobbying machines in the U.S. That's something they're doing as well. And you know what? China's in a weaker spot than we are right now. We have to open our eyes to see it. If we do that, Xi Jinping's going to have to fold. And if he doesn't, fine, I'm ready to cut the cord. We depend on them for our pharmaceuticals. We depend on them for our electronics, the phones in our pockets, the shoes on our feet. Even our own military equipment, the F-35 jets that we make in this country, depend on China to provide the parts. They don't depend on us for their military, but we depend on them for ours? No, that ends on my watch. They don't depend on us for their pharmaceuticals, but we depend on them for ours? No, that ends on my watch. And one thing that's actually really important, I'm the only presidential candidate that's made a hard commitment on this, but we have to keep it. We will hold them accountable for unleashing hell on the world with the COVID-19 pandemic, a man-made virus in a lab. If we don't do that using every financial lever we have available, we can actually expect even worse in the future. That's my rule. If you hit us back, we hit you back 10 times harder. That's got to be how we stand up with the spine. And my bet is China's going to have to fold and then finally play by the same set of rules. But it's going to take a president with a spine of steel to see that through. And I think that's what it's going to take, somebody from the outside to do. The special interests don't want me saying this. The mega donor class in the GOP does not approve of this message. But this is what it's going to take to actually think on the timescales of history rather than just on the timescale of tomorrow. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Vivek, one of my main concerns is the border.
Oh, yeah. This is a solvable one, too.
Yeah, and I'd just like to know what you're going to do about it, because this is ruining this
Yes.
country.
So my philosophy is this, and I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. Your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. Period. I've been to the southern border. I've been to the northern border too. So the only thing I would say is borders. Because that's where the frontier's going next. I'm the only person talking about the northern border. I've been there. That's where the real hardened criminals are now coming. Because they're smart. They don't want to, so they're going to where the puck is going. Here's the answer. We will use our own military to secure our own southern border and our northern border too. We're sending our sons and daughters to go fight somebody else's war, protect some other random nation's border halfway around the world in Ukraine or somewhere else. No, we will use our own military to secure our own borders. Don't just build the wall, build both walls. The wall is not enough, though. The military has to go along with it. Use aquatic barriers in the Rio Grande. They're cheap. They're mobile. They work in the river. Texas is trying to use them. The federal government won't, not because they don't work, but because they do work, actually. And a dime, every dime of federal foreign aid that goes to Central America, we will end it. The only thing we will fund is them building border walls for each of their countries between Venezuela and Mexico. That's a big one. End federal funding for sanctuary cities. Our money and our national debt is being used to fund sanctuary cities in this country. That ends too. So those are basic policies that I'm pursuing. That seals the problem. That ends the fentanyl crisis. Most of that fentanyl is crossing our southern border. In fact, our northern border, we had enough fentanyl crossing the northern border to kill 3 million Americans just last year. So it's not just build the wall, build both walls. Use our military to seal both borders. And then I think we have to end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal migrants to this country. The 14th Amendment was never written to apply to that application of birthright citizenship. That ends on my watch as well. So great question. I'm going to have that done by March of 2025. This much I know I can do. The country that put a man on the moon can get this done. And the beauty of this is just using the laws that we already have on the books. That's the beauty of this. Just takes a president to execute. Thank you for that. You young man right there.
I really enjoyed seeing you call Nikki Haley, Dick Cheney, and 3-inch heels. And I was wondering what you plan to do about the revolving door of politicians and lobbyists.
Shut it. Lock that revolving door. Corruption is the problem right now. It's Democrats and Republicans alike. I mean, the truth is, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, man, woman, black, white, I don't care. You should not be making money profiting off your time in public service. If they say public servants need to pay more money, fine, we could debate that. Maybe the salaries should be higher. But they shouldn't be turning to corruption to make millions. It's wrong. So here's what I would do. If you have worked in the government, you are not allowed, you should, on my watch, will not be allowed to lobby that same government for at least 10 years after you've left. If you've done special deals with private companies or regulated them, as Nikki Haley did with Boeing in South Carolina, you should not be able to join the board of Boeing to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing nothing afterwards. That's what's happening. It's rampant across the economy. You should not be allowed to trade individual stocks while you are in Congress, passing the laws that affect those companies, but you know in advance about it. You shouldn't be able to trade individual stocks if you're a regulator of that industry. This isn't complicated. These aren't black ideas or white ideas. The super PACs are the ones that are stuffing the advertisements you see on TV. Let me tell you about this. They say it's $3,300 is the limit to give to a political candidate for president in a primary. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough to corrupt somebody. You know what is $33 million is for a lot of these people? Okay, I'm not playing. As I said, my biggest donor is me. We put tens of millions of dollars of my hard-earned money, not inherited, hard-earned, into this campaign because I don't want to be their circus monkey. But the other people are circus monkeys. They're pawns on a chessboard. I think that if you're going to donate money to a super PAC that supports candidates, that should also be subject to the same maximum as donating to a campaign. This isn't complicated. But it's going to take somebody from the outside coming in to fix that system, or else you can just expect more of the same. And if you want proof of this, you know, it's not affecting this part of Iowa as much, but it does affect other parts of Iowa you guys may be familiar with. Anybody familiar with this carbon dioxide capture pipeline in this state? Few of you. So they're using federal money to capture carbon dioxide from ethanol plants and then put it underground in a pipeline that many farmers don't want going across their backyard. Why? Because in Mississippi they had a rupture of one, sent a majority of a town, a good portion of a town, to a hospital. Farmers don't want that. It affects their crop yields. They're saying now, no, they will use eminent domain. I don't know if you know what that is, but the government effectively just setting a price and deciding they get to do it anyway on your own private property. I am the only candidate in this race who has been able to take a position on that, to say I'm against it. Why? Everybody else is responsive to the special interests. Every other one, not Haley, not DeSantis, not Trump, has said a word about this one. It's not like they don't know about it. This is a major issue for Iowa farmers. I'm the only candidate who's been able to say that Ronna McDaniel, the failed chairwoman of the RNC, needs to resign after 5 failed years. We had disasters in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023, the Republican Party becoming a party of losers. I can't talk about accountability in government if I'm not talking about it in our own party. Again, not a single other Republican candidate on or off that debate stage is willing to call Ronna McDaniel out for those failures. Why? Not a single other person can tell you that that climate change agenda is being weaponized so that people can actually make more money off the subsidies going to the CO2 pipeline or the electric vehicle subsidies or the windmill or the solar subsidies. It's a racket. Why? It takes somebody who isn't bought and paid for to do it. And they will try every tactic in the book, because I called out Nikki Haley and Ronna McDaniel. They then said, they tried to use the tactics of the left. They'll do anything to avoid being exposed for their corruption. That Vivek is misogynistic or has a woman problem. No, I'm married to the strongest woman I know. My wife, Apurva, she's not here today because she's saving lives at the cancer hospital at Ohio State, where she's a throat surgeon, one of the most successful at what she does. And then she's going to be here tonight doing events across the state separately from me. She's a badass first lady coming up, I'll tell you that. So I don't bow the knee to this identity politics when it comes from the left or when it comes from the right. And I don't bow to the corruption when it comes to the left, from the left or from the right. We have to stand for what's true, the truth. Speak the truth, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Not just to the Democrats on the other side. We have to speak the truth to our own side in this Republican Party. So I appreciate that question, young man. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 21. We're doing this for your generation, man. You do your part. I'm going to make sure that you're not sent to fight in World War III with somebody else's gun over your shoulder and $200,000 in national debt hanging over your head. That's what's hanging over your head right now.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, it's my job to make sure of it. So thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah, please.
Do you have any ideas on how to combat the environmental crisis?
Yeah, let's start clean air and clean water. That's what we're missing in this. I've traveled to Flint, Michigan, for example. And I don't know if you're... Actually, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
18.
You're 18. You can vote. That's good. And the most important vote you'll cast is this Iowa caucus. Because when you show up at the Iowa caucus, it's like the equivalent of 1 million people, actually, in terms of the impact that it has on selecting the president, because Iowa goes first. So just remember that. We're not focusing enough on clean air and clean water. All the climate boondoggles, a lot of people making money off of that. But actually, I'll just give you an example. Since you asked the question, I'll get specific. Electric cars weigh more than normal cars because of the batteries. The amount of particulate matter that gets released into the air from the tires having greater friction on the ground is greater than the particulate matter that comes out of a tailpipe of a normal vehicle. You don't hear about that. That affects actually the quality of the air we breathe in. That's what we need to be focusing on. Here's another one, that carbon dioxide capture pipeline. There are leaks and ruptures. That's bad for our environment. You want to know which state says they won't import ethanol from Iowa unless the carbon intensity standards are lowered? That's California, trying to choke Iowa. And guess which state says that they ban carbon dioxide capture pipelines in their state? It's California. So it's hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy. You know, and actually on this one issue, and it's a lot of grassroots conservatives, myself included, that are pushing against the CO2 pipeline in Iowa. The Sierra Club's on our side, which is interesting because it's actually respecting the environment is different than obsessing over changes in the weather patterns. So I think that clean air and clean water is a place that we should be able to start. What happened in Flint, Michigan is unconscionable. Those people still have not received justice for what happened with their water supply there. And I think the more we're focused on clean air and clean water and our natural parks and the preservation of the beauty of this country, as Republican Teddy Roosevelt did when he led this country, the better off we're going to be versus this climate agenda, which has nothing to do with the climate. It has to do with China catching up to the United States, because we're shifting the same carbon emissions they're telling us to stop here. We're shifting them to China in the name of stopping global warming. Here's another one, too, before I leave this topic. The biggest opponents to carbon emissions in the United States are also the biggest opponents to nuclear energy, which is the greatest form of carbon-free energy production known to man. That doesn't make sense unless you realize what's going on. The problem with nuclear energy is that not that it's not good enough at solving the energy crisis, it's that it might be too good. What this is really about is letting China catch up to the United States, and they're far more advanced on nuclear energy and on burning coal than we are. So we're falling for China's trick, and that's not going to happen on my watch, and you deserve a president that makes sure that when you get to be my age or the age of the other people in this room, that our country is still the leader of the free world because we are strong at home, rather than watching China effectively put us in a straitjacket and pass us by. Thank you. Great question. I appreciate it. Time for maybe a couple more? Thank you.
My question to you is, how do you plan on dethroning Trump in his tacticianry on gaining ground and support from other people?
Here's what I would say. You better find me and hold me to task if I'm wrong on this. I think we're going to win the Iowa caucus. Many of the people supporting us, I mean, raise your hand if you've completed a poll in recent weeks. A couple of you. These polls, far less than a third of you in this room even have. Most of the people supporting us have not been polled. Most of the people, even on college campuses that I'm visiting, they've never even been to a caucus. So I think we're going to deliver a shock on January 15th. But it's done this way. It's not done through the TV ads and the paid-for approaches. We're visiting all 99 counties not once but twice. It's the full grass league times 2. And so it's not up to me. It's not up to Trump. It's up to you. And the America First agenda does not belong to Donald Trump. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you, the people of this country. And I respect his legacy for this country and a lot of his accomplishments. Other people like to bash him. I don't. I respect his legacy. But I want to take that agenda and pass on the America First vision to your generation. And I think it's going to take somebody with fresh legs to do it. I truly believe that. And here's the thing. I think I want you to also hold me to a higher standard than we've held our presidents to in a very long time. Policy is half the job of the next president, no doubt. And there's some great questions on policy we've talked about. But half the job of the U.S. president is also to revive our national character. Actually, that's what Reagan talked about when he left office in January of 1989. Reviving our national character. And I know you don't have kids yet, probably. How old are you? You're 18. I have 2 sons. How old's your son?
2.
It's 2. Similar age to mine. My older one's 3.5, and my younger one is 17 months. I want to be able to look my 2 sons in the eye and tell them. The kids, my 3.5-year-old, he knows if you're lying to him. He can tell. I want to tell them and mean it. That I want you to grow up and be like him, whoever that is in the White House. I think it's been a long time since we've held our presidents to that standard. That is the standard I want you to hold me to, and my wife Apurva to. That is a high standard. That's the standard we hold ourselves to. And I think that's what it's going to take to get this country back. And I think people in this state, you're not blind. You guys have a sixth sense for telling the difference between a politician giving you some slogans and somebody who's sharing with you their actual convictions. I think you can also tell the difference between somebody who you're going to look your kids in the eye and say, I want you to grow up and be like him, versus somebody who says, I like their policies, but maybe I wouldn't say that to my kids. That's a standard anyway that we're going to hold ourselves to. And my bet is that, if you want somebody who's going to Speak truth to power. As I said in the beginning, vote for somebody who speaks the truth to you. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to do my part, and I'm going to ask you to do yours. Thank you, young man. I appreciate it. We got time for maybe a couple more. Go to the gentleman in the back. I'm going to stay here till they make me leave. I'm having too much fun here. We have a couple more stops, one more stop today.
So I looked at the national debt clock yesterday, and my determination was that every 20 seconds we go another $1 million in debt. That's $3 million a minute.
That's insane.
That's completely insane.
Yep.
Do you have any hope, even any hope, that we can slow that down?
More than hope, sir. What's your name?
John Olson.
John, I'm going to tell you how we are actually going to do it. You're asking an important question. These young people here have about $200,000 more of debt on their shoulders than they ever signed up for. Okay? Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to be very practical here. Get the oil and natural gas out from underneath our ground and sell it. That will buy down trillions of our national debt. Next step, $7 trillion of that national debt was due to 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that did not advance our interests. The Taliban, for God's sake, is still in charge 20 years later. Iraq is still a broken country, even worse off now than it was when it at least was protected from Iran incursion. So don't repeat those same mistakes in places like Ukraine, sending $200 billion of our taxpayer money so some Ukrainian kleptocrat can buy a bigger house while we have a national debt problem right here in this country. That ends on my watch. And then we come back to what I said to the gentleman in the front. What was your name again? Kurt. Shut down 75% of the federal bureaucracy. Now we're really talking. That national debt with those 3 things is under $20 trillion under my watch. 20 trillion is still a big number, but it's much more manageable than 34 trillion. And just the math on this, your interest rate payments actually are going to be less than half. Our interest rate payments are less than half, even though the debt only goes from 34 to 20, because the smaller your debt, the lower the rates are. It's going to take a CEO in the White House to get this done, and we do not have a lot of time, guys. I want to tell you this. It's not a convenient time in our life for me to be running for president. Kids, that age. We're living the American dream in a beautiful life that my parents would have never imagined when they came to this country. I'll tell you why I'm doing it now. If our interest payments on our national debt become the largest line item in our federal budget, we're done. Then we're in quicksand, and we're not going to find our way out. We're working with it. That's about 5 years from now. We're working with that 5-year window. So sometimes people ask me, oh, you're young. Maybe if you don't win this time, are you going to do it in 2028? I mean, that works for me. Do it in 2032, not doing it at all. That works for me in my life. It's probably, in many ways, we may be happier and living a life. We're going to be just fine. But I don't think that works for our country. I think it requires a president who takes it seriously enough, has enough of a spine, is independent of the special interests that are against the cuts that I told Kurt we're going to make, but also somebody who isn't going to be duped, who actually understands the law and the Constitution. And I've hired thousands of people. I can tell you, different people have different skills. Some people will be the nerdy law professor, over here. And I've been through law school. I was that person for some time. But it also takes somebody who's going to execute and get it done, but may not know the law. Those 2 things don't go together, usually. And my faith teaches me that God puts each of us here for a purpose. That we have a moral duty. Each of us has our own God-given gifts. Every one of us does. And I think it's our job to look ourselves in the mirror and ask, how do I use the gifts that God has given me to achieve the maximum positive impact I can have in the short time I have been given on this earth? And I did this last year. After our second son, we brought him into this world. And I could not look myself in the mirror and just be a passerby and watch this decay without actually stepping up to do my part. And tackling that national debt is not that I just hold hope. I know we can do it. It's exactly how I told you. I can't watch from the sidelines as the rest squander it in front of our eyes. Thank you for that question.
5 minutes.
Okay, got it. We'll take the last question and we'll wrap.
Okay, back to Ukraine. The map of Europe has been kind of a moving target for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Ukraine is not a NATO country.
Yes, it's not.
And we have no treaty obligation to throw people into that fight.
How do you know more than our Secretary of State?
Because I've done a deep dive
Yeah,
into this.
okay, good.
If elected president, how do you see our role financially and militarily? If Ukraine and Russia just keep throwing people into the meat grinder with no clear end to the conflict, we don't seem to be going anywhere near trying to resolve the issue. What's the end game for the United States?
So the end game right now is a reasonable peace deal in Ukraine. End this war. I do not want to use another dime of your taxpayer money to defend somebody else's border. I mean, look, even the parts of Ukraine that are occupied, let's get real. You probably know this, given your knowledge here. The parts of eastern Ukraine that are occupied are Russian-speaking regions that, frankly, don't even view themselves as part of Ukraine for many of the people who live there. They haven't been represented in the Ukrainian parliament for the last 10 years. And for that, we're taking a risk of major conflict in World War III, sending hundreds of billions of dollars of our money. I'll tell you why we're doing it. You want some real talk? This is the very country that sent a $5 million bribe to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. And it's not an accident that we're then sending $200 billion of your money to that same country. And whether it's Nikki Haley to Joe Biden to Hillary Clinton, whoever else, I'm going to call this out. You should not be making money off selling off our foreign policy, period. And so that's really what's going on here. So that'll end on my watch. We'll do a reasonable deal that ends the war instantly. And will require, in return, Russia to exit its military alliance with China. That's the single greatest threat that we face today. That reduces the risk of World War III. And here's my foreign policy in a nutshell. Stay out of World War III. Declare economic independence from communist China. And then do something really radical that the foreign policy establishment in both parties hasn't done for a very long time. Secure our own homeland right here in the United States. Protect our own borders. Cyber defenses, missile defenses. Protecting ourselves against attacks on our own soil. That's what I'm going to do. And so, I'll say this in closing. I'm doing things differently than normal presidential candidates in a lot of ways. We're talking to high school students, college students, reaching the next generation, trying to reach them via social media and otherwise, even though other candidates criticize me for doing that. We can't hide from the next generation. We have to step up and lead a generation that is lost. I'm seeing Jake Paul actually fighting a tape of his fight. I'm going to be actually at his fight tonight because he invited me to go there. You guys, for those of you who are into that, I'm going to be sitting ringside for that tonight. Is it because we'll have fun with it? I mean, it's not my main hobby, but I want to reach people who we're not reaching normally. To say that America First includes all Americans, not a bunch of Ukrainian corrupt kleptocrat bureaucrats, but America First includes all Americans here at home. And if we have a leader now who stands for who we are, then I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I don't think we have to be ancient Rome. That's what I believe. I can't leave you hanging now. You tell me.
Well, our country is so divided, and our Republican Party is so divided. How are you going to be able to get it together?
That's a great question to close on. And what's your name? What's your name, ma'am? Diana. It's a great question. I'll close on this. I care deeply about national unity. Here's how we're going to do it. It's not going to be through moderation, actually. So some people think moderate compromise makes sense. Good people think this. I disagree. The way we're going to unite this country is by embracing the radicalism of the American revolutionary ideals themselves. The idea that you get to speak your mind freely as long as I get to in return. The idea that every one of our voices and votes counts equally in a constitutional republic. Those are radical ideas. For most of human history, it was done the other way. In old world Europe, it was done the other way. But that's how we do it on this side of 1776. That's what makes America great. That's what makes America itself. We've celebrated, when we teach our next generation, I grew up in a generation where we were taught this, to celebrate our diversity and our differences. So much that we forgot all of the ways we are really just the same as Americans, bound by that common set of ideals. And I believe deep in my heart that those ideals still exist. I'm running for president to revive them. It's on the back of every coin. Take a look as you pay today for your meal. E pluribus unum means from many, one. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. And if we can revive that dream over group identity and victimhood and grievance, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, not China, is going to defeat us. That's what American exceptionalism is all about. We don't have to be that nation in decline. I think this is our last chance for me to tell you this. I think it's true today. We can still be a nation in our ascent. I'm not going to be the guy who tells you it's morning in America, guys. It's not. But it can be. I'm not going to tell you the American dream, especially to young people. I can't look you in the eye and tell you the American dream is alive and well. It is not. It's alive and hanging on for life support. But it can be. I'm asking for your help. I'm not going to do this alone. I can't do this alone. If you all do your part, spread the word, the message to the people who couldn't be here today. Bring them out 30 minutes of their time and of your life and their life to save this country on January 15th. If you all do your part, then I promise you, my wife Apurva and I, we're going to do our part to make sure, not in some cheesy politician way, but in a true way, to make sure that our country's best days are actually still ahead of us. Thank you for coming today, guys. God bless you. God bless everyone. God bless you.